Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, I got to tell you about the fabulous, most groovy YouTube copyright. Open up.
Hi, and thank you very much for clicking on the video. The next movies that we'll be looking at in my movie collection are going to be 3 of Edgar Wright's movies that have come to 4K. So I'm not going to be giving a review on the movies themselves, but I am going to be talking about the general packaging when it comes to the movies, you know, how the discs are and like more or less their disc quality. And I'm just going to give some brief thoughts about, you know, the movies and what I think about them and why I got them for my collection. So a little tidbit about Edgar Wright is that he is a very visual director. He normally has a certain style of his. It's a little bit hectic, and but all of his visuals are pretty clean, and they're also just really nice frames to look at. Also, sound is very important when it comes to his style of filmmaking, and I don't mean just like in the general sense where, yeah, sound is important in the movie. I mean it in the sense of sort of like with James Gunn, soundtrack and the score of the movie is very important to his style of filmmaking that really goes with his visuals. Okay, so first off, we're going to start with Baby Driver. As far as I'm aware, it's the first one of his movies that have come to 4K. The movie was released theatrically in 2017. I went to go see this movie back when it came out, and I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. This movie was what kind of made me an Edgar Wright fan, so I'm always looking forward to whatever new release he comes out with. Now, as far as the packaging for the 4K is concerned, it's a pretty standard packaging. You know, it has the slipcover and it has you know, your movie. I think it did come with a steelbook, but I don't remember seeing it, and at least in person. I'm actually really happy that they went with the poster art for this. It's obviously, you know, I think what happened was that they, like, you know, took the photographs of the characters and then they make it where it almost looks like it's painted, so it kind of gives it a little bit more of a vintage feel, especially with the colors that were chosen. I got this movie back out when it was released, so I'm able to get the slipcover, although now I think if you were to buy the movie, you might not get it with the slipcover. One thing that I don't like about 4K releases, especially during their earlier years, is that they had this HDR logo right on the slip or right on the box, but luckily this HDR logo is actually a sticker. And on this there is no HDR logo, so you actually get most of the cover. I mean, you do get like a little review here on both of these parts where it says sensation. I'm not particularly too much of a fan when they start putting stuff on the artwork, just because I like to look at the artwork. Now, even though I was complaining a bit about the HDR logo being sort of stamped on the image when it came to the Matrix movies, I still haven't removed this because it's a sticker, and I don't know if generally a movie is worth more or less if it has the sticker on them or not. So for now, I'm just like keeping it on here. I don't plan to sell my movie for any foreseeable future, but I guess just to sort of like preserve that like, you know, like they did come with this sticker, but I guess that's just more like my collector mentality talking right there. And of course the movie comes with the 4K and a Blu-ray and a digital copy. One thing that it's about this movie, at least back when it was originally released, it does have this little flap when it comes to the box. I remember some Blu-rays when Blu-ray was initially a thing back in like around 2008. Some of them actually did come with this flap as well. I'm not really a fan of this flap just because I don't like doing this. So this flap, as it gets older and it gets more use out of it, eventually will stop snapping into place. Like with some of my older Blu-rays, the little plastic bit is now really difficult for it to like actually stay on, or it won't even snap on at all. So this just will become irritating in the future, at least so long as I don't wear it out. And if I try to cut it off, then it's just gonna look off. Also, just as a little side note, sometimes movies will come with this Rotten Tomato little stamp or sticker on it, which I actually really don't like that at all. I don't like the aggregate or any kind of website that can at any moment go defunct, just being on here. Imagine if this was like some older site and then it had like a stamp on it and then it was now defunct, and it's like, okay, it's just an ugly piece of image that's on there that would otherwise cover up the artwork, which I know it's a little stamp and it's not anything to be upset about, but it's just like a little thing that just brings it just a little bit down for me. But all in all, it's fine. I would have been happier if this was actually a sticker that I can peel off, but no, they actually had to have it stamped on the actual image. Now, as far as the visual goes for the 4K disc, it's actually pretty good visuals. I don't know if it's reference material or not, because again, I watch my movies on a 50-inch. But from what I saw from this, it was actually pretty good, especially like during the diner scene. I was actually able to see the threading on Jamie Foxx's jacket, and all those all the imperfections in the skin. So that was so the detail on this disc is actually pretty good. And then as far as the sound is concerned, I listened to this movie on my soundbar and subwoofer, and they're not cheap soundbar subwoofers, but it's not going to be anywhere as good as a Dolby Atmos setup, that's what the audio track for this movie is for. Even with that, the sound mixing was pretty well. The movie has a lot of licensed music playing on, but it also has a lot of diegetic sounds as well as dialogue. And even with all that mixing, I was able to make out every, all the instruments. The dialogue wasn't getting drowned out by the soundtrack. And then during the action scenes, everything was sounded pretty well. So as far as audio goes, I think this is a really good mix. And the next 4K is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Now, originally this movie was released back in 2010, but it recently got a 4K in 2021. As of the making of this video, I think you can still find this movie with the slipcover on it, although mine is just a little bit damaged, but it's not too bad. At least it's on this side and not on this side where it's going to be more visible. So this slipcover is actually like a shiny glossy finish, and what I really like about this slipcover is that this finish is not easily removed. So the thing about slipcovers and whether they're glossy or shiny, sometimes the artwork will tend to fade away or rub away, depending on if you scratch it or if it rubs against movies the wrong way. So like one of my movies that I have is Dune. Is back when I bought it, it had little scratches on the black of it, and the same thing with No Time to Die, that some of the white started to rub away. So those types of slipcovers aren't generally the best quality when it comes to how they're printed, but I'm very pleased that this one is actually probably one of the best finishes that it has. It doesn't wear away, and even if I take my nail, and I'm not gonna scratch it or anything, but even if I just run it through, none of it will fall off, which is not something I could say for some of the other more glossier or shiny slipcovers. And then the standard box artwork is going to be right here. It's not going to be shiny, it's going to be matte finish, but it's funny, I haven't actually even opened this movie yet, just because I've seen it quite a few times already. And I think I only bought this movie because I might have not have gotten it at full price. I might have gotten it for a little bit less when it was on sale. But otherwise, I probably wouldn't have bought this movie if I hadn't seen it so many times, and if maybe I didn't think that in the future I would probably show this to another friend who hasn't seen it, which is generally what I tend to do with some of my friends who haven't seen this movie. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's this movie that put Edgar Wright really on the map when it came to his visual flair, or it's oh, this is an Edgar Wright movie. I mean, I know he worked with Simon Pegg quite a bit with the Cornetto trilogy, but I kind of consider that trilogy its own little thing and more of a collaborative effort rather than an Edgar Wright specific movie. As of now, I think that's Scott Pilgrim is actually the one that has the most color variety. So I'm not entirely sure when it comes to the contents of whether how good this transfer is for 4K, but I feel like as far as HDR goes, this movie will really benefit from that, because it uses a lot of reds, a lot of blues, and greens. There's some scenes that are white, and it's not too much of a dark movie except for when it goes into the nighttime, but even then there's not really very much where it's just like really night with not as much color in the frame, although I do one scene near the end does come to mind. Then as far as audio goes, it doesn't have as much licensed music in this movie as his future works. I think maybe only 1 or 2 songs are actually licensed songs. But back when I watched it in the Blu-ray, the sound mixing was pretty well, and I haven't heard any complaints about the mixing in this 4K disc. And the mixing was also done in Dolby Atmos, though I'm unaware if the mixing is a static mix or a dynamic mix. Now, this movie is pretty loud when it comes to its action pieces. From what I remember hearing in at least the older transfers of the movies, it was still pretty clear. So again, I think that this is going to be a great mix. You're still going to be able to hear, all the dialogue separated from the diegetic sounds of all the action pieces, and even with the instruments playing. But as I said, I have not watched this 4K disc yet, mainly just because I haven't had an opportunity or an incentive to do so as of yet. So for right now, this is just more or less of what I heard from this 4K disc and my thoughts on the Blu-ray back when it was released way back when. And now we get to possibly my favorite Edgar Wright movie, Last Night in Soho. This movie was released late in 2021, and it got its 4K release in early 2022. I think you can still buy this movie with the slipcover as of the making of this video. So what I actually think is neat about this slipcover is that while it's not glossy like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the logo right here is actually embossed, and not just the front of it, it's also on both sides of the spine where it's embossed. And I just thought that, that's pretty neat. There's not really anything that's going to be obscuring this image. No HDR logo, no Rotten Tomato thing. Although the Movies Anywhere sign is going to be right here in this top part, but at least it's here in this part of the logo rather than actually in the image. And then as far as the actual box image goes, it's the same image. So this was the movie that was actually the most excited to get, at least back when it was announced. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see this movie in the theater, so I can't really attest to how that experience would have been. So I don't know how clear or how well the sound mixing was in the theater. But when I bought it, on the 4K and I saw it at home, I made sure that I had the room as dark as I possibly could, and I turned up the sound as much as I could without upsetting the neighbors. And wow, it's just the image quality on the disc is, I think it's pretty great. Well, sort of. The dream sequences, as far as I can tell, had the most amount of clarity or detail in them, just because the way how they were shot. It mainly focuses on Anya Taylor-Joy's character for a lot of its time, and because it's dream sequences, a lot more of the background is just a little bit more obscured, or a little bit more hectic things going on in the background, and just a little bit more out of focus, mainly because we're getting Anya Taylor-Joy's character that's most of the time going to be on focus, whereas when the movie focuses in the real world with Thomasin McKenzie's character, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the background is a lot more static, and I mean, it's not as energetic as the dream sequences, because those are dream sequences. So while the detail is still good during the real world sections, especially during the nighttime, doesn't have as much flair, or the detail doesn't jump out you as much as I noticed on the dream sequences. But that's not to say that the detail on those parts is bad. It's still pretty good detail. It's just during dream sequences, it just seems like it's just because the way it was shot, it just seems like just a little bit more. Now, as far as the colors go with the HDR, the movie mainly focuses a lot on blues and reds and some oranges or yellows. Its color wheel isn't that varied when it comes to the dream sequences, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Obviously, this movie has a very specific color tone, and the two main colors that really take over the film are blue and red. Obviously, there's going to be some gradients here and there, but it's mainly those two colors. During the daytime, they are pretty neutral colors or sort of colder tones, and then it's during the nighttime when some of those colors pop out a little bit more. You see a little bit more brightness in like the lights, like the post lights or the little bulbs. Now, as far as sound quality goes, I know that it was done in Dolby Atmos, and again, I really wish that I had a Dolby Atmos setup, maybe one day. I was still very clearly able to tell all the sounds, so it was still, the dialogue was still clear, the score was still able to be heard. It wasn't drowning out any of the diegetics sounds going on in the movie. Also, there's a singing number in this movie, and when I heard it, is oh wow, the vocals sounded really, really great, but that's also probably in part because one of the actors here can really sing. All in all, I think Last Night in Soho is a pretty great disc. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's reference material or not, just because of the equipment that I have. But even with it, just if you have any kind of setup, it doesn't have to be like a really expensive 75-inch or the actual Dolby Atmos setup. This disc, I think, is still a really good transfer. So some brief thoughts on the movie is that for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, even though I've actually seen this movie quite a number of times and I actually do enjoy it, I actually almost didn't buy this movie. It's mainly because it's one of those movies that even though I enjoy watching it, and if I were to ever watch it on TV back when, cable was a thing, I mean, I know it still is, but it's practically dead, it would be a movie that I would turn on, or even if I had it on the streaming websites. I forget in what streaming website I had watched this in a few years ago, or if it's movies that I want to show my friends that they haven't seen it, then it's like, okay, it would be a movie to pop on. But personally for me, it's not a movie that is like up there as one of my favorites. It's more like I've seen this movie quite a number of times, mainly due out of happenstance. And even then, when I bought this movie, I didn't buy this movie at full price. It did have a slight price drop, not too much. I obviously didn't get this when it was like 50% off or anything, but it was enough of a drop where I thought it's like, okay, it'd be nice to buy this movie, but I'm not entirely sure when I would watch it again. But I think this is a good film, and I think that this is the one that really popularized Edgar Wright, at least when it came to the general populace. And also, I just really like Chris Evans in this movie. Now, as for Baby Driver, as I said back when I watched this movie in theaters, I really did enjoy this movie. I think it was about maybe halfway into the movie, or maybe a little bit less than half, that I decided, okay, I'm going to buy this movie just because I enjoyed it that much. And this is the one that really turned me into an Edgar Wright fan. So now I always look forward to any of his movies that he comes out with. So the movie is more about the character Baby, and it is actually a romance movie. I mean, I know it's also a bit of a heist movie, but the heist isn't really the main concern of the movie, if that makes any sense. I know my friend thought that it was a racing movie, kind of similar like Fast and the Furious, but I told him that no, it's not a racing movie, but he didn't believe me and kind of went on his phone after the first 2 minutes and didn't watch the movie again. The soundtrack that came out with this movie, I listened to it so many times. I had gotten it as soon as I figure out that it was released. So the two tracks from that album that I've actually listened to the most is Never Ever Gonna Give You Up, the one done by Barry White, and also Brighton Rock by Queen, which it's actually a really nice song to drive through because then I just want to go fast. Finally, Last Night in Soho, as soon as I saw this poster art, I was already intrigued. And then I found out it was Edgar Wright, and then as soon as I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, I knew that I was going to like this movie. I already made up my mind that I was going to like it. Unfortunately, I just was not able to watch this in theaters, and I really wish I did, because when I watched this at home, I was like, oh my gosh, it was so great. I really enjoyed watching this movie, and I really wish I had watched this in theaters. I bought this movie at full price as soon as I saw it on the store shelves. And I will say that actually some of the fashion in this movie I really like Thomas Mackenzie's coat jacket that she wears for this movie I actually really want. And I know my friend actually wanted to watch this movie mainly because it's this guy, I actually don't know his name, was actually one of the doctors for Doctor Who. And then Anya Taylor-Joy is like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful in this movie. I really like her, especially her eyes, like, oh my gosh. And Thomas Mackenzie really grew on me. Her character I really liked within the first few minutes. She had like this era of naivety, but still like with ambition, and then, you know, going through the trials that she goes through this movie, and just you get to see how her character actually is under tense situations. And it's like, oh wow, she was the performance was really great. And just anything when, even though the way how these two interact in the movie, based on the context of this, you really want to root for Mackenzie so that she succeeds in what she sets out to do in this movie, and even some of the things that she encounters, I'm just like rooting for her. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Edgar Wright's 3 movies that you can get on 4K. So I can't decide which of these two I actually like better. I think overall I just by a hair like Baby Driver just a little more than Last Night in Soho, but I still really like this movie. Overall, I'm very happy with the packaging. I really like the slipcovers, and I think the discs are all great. Again, I can't attest for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, but I imagine that it's also a good transfer like the other 2 movies. So I hope that you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope that you're enjoying me talking about my 4K collection right here. I haven't decided about which movie in my collection I want to talk about next, but I am working on another project that is going to be different from me just talking about the movies. It's going to be a little bit more video game related. So hopefully you'll stick around for that and watch, because I had a really fun time making that video. And hopefully soon I'll also be able to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Right here. I know my first video was actually kind of terrible quality. I wasn't very satisfied with that video, so you know, I went ahead and, you know, changed the background so at least it's not boring to look at, and at least the lighting is actually a little bit better now. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it, or that you can share this with another person who also is really into at least collecting, or, you know, talking about the 4K discs. And I hope to see you in the next one.